President Ronald Reagan's former press secretary, 73-year-old James Brady, died on Monday. But now a Virginia medical examiner has ruled his death a homicide resulting from the injuries he sustained during the assassination attempt on former President Reagan more than 30 years ago. Now prosecutors may attempt to bring new charges against John Hinckley Jr., the man who shot Brady, the president, and others back in 1981. Hinckley was tried and found not guilty by reason of insanity. So, can he be retried, or will double jeopardy be applied? Let's bring in our legal panel for this discussion, trial attorneys Misty Marris and Kirsten Wilson. Ladies, I'll start with you first, Misty. Is this double jeopardy to try a guy 33 years later?
This is absolutely double jeopardy. No question about it. This case fails from the get-go. Prosecutors have no shot. The conduct that was at issue has already been decided by the court, tried, it's done. He was acquitted on the lesser charge of assault with the intent to kill. And therefore, he cannot be retried on the exact same facts. Nothing has changed.
Is it possible to get around this in some way, you think?
I actually disagree with Misty. I don't think that it's double jeopardy. There's a number of U.S. Supreme Court cases that have looked at circumstances like this and said it depends how they're charged. If there are different elements involved in the offenses, then it doesn't violate double jeopardy. And a number of states have actually looked at circumstances where there was an attempted murder, subsequent death, years, even decades later, and then a homicide charge.
You bring up a good point, though. How do you all of a sudden prove this? You think about it, tragic in every sense of the word, but can you really say that 33 years later, the reason that a 73-year-old man died was because of being shot 33 years before?
This is going to be a huge issue. If the prosecution could possibly get past the double jeopardy issue, then they have to prove that but for this incident, this occurrence, the shooting, he would not have died. They have to show a connection that beyond a reasonable doubt that his death was caused by that event. That's a huge hurdle.
Yeah.
How does that play into the ability of a prosecutor to bring this case?
They have to be having huge consultations on specifically that, and also the insanity piece, which we can talk a little bit more about. But the causation, even though the medical examiner supposedly has said, nobody's actually seen the reports, but the medical examiner has said that it was a homicide and it's linked to the events of Hinckley from 33 years ago. There has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that there weren't other intervening circumstances over 3 decades that could have contributed.
That's a lot of medical records to go. That's a lot of medical records to go through. Speaking of the medical portion of this, or the mental health portion of this at least, Hinckley's found not guilty by reason of insanity. It's not that he's insane at the time of trial. It's that defense rests on being insane at the time you committed the crime. How does that change all of a sudden? Do we go back and prove that he was sane?
I don't think that can't change. There was a ruling by the court. He was found to be insane. We're looking at his mental state at the time of trial. In order for anything to change, yes.
At the time of trial, or the time of the shooting?
At the time of the shooting,
okay.
Excuse me. Yes, we'd have to look at his mental state at the time of that incident. And
is it possible to reverse that ruling, all of a sudden to have new testimony and new witnesses and new experts to look at this and go, well, maybe they got it wrong back then?
I think the government could potentially put on new evidence and new experts, but all the prior evidence is still coming in. And the reality is that previously it was proven by the fact finder that he was insane at the time of the offense. Competency occurs at the time of trial, insanity at the time of the offense, and we are talking about the same circumstances of the assassination 33 years ago.
So in some ways you have to go back, and probably there's a lot of folks who aren't around anymore. Folks have forgotten, different things have happened. At some level, though, does it make a difference? And obviously everyone wants to see justice served, but is Mr. Hinckley going to be in a different state, whether he is charged or not, of this new offense?
He still remains in the mental health facility that he was placed in after this event. If he's found to be insane, he'll still be there anyway. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Kirsten, conceivably, though, he could be, the only way this changes is if he's charged with murder, you get over double jeopardy, you get over the fact that you have to prove that 33 years later this is what killed him, and then he would have to be convicted and not found to be insane, and then he goes to jail. Is that the idea here?
It is, and it's a monumental burden. The government, in the first instance, and in just standard homicide cases, looking at beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the biggest burden that we have in our system. And then when you start adding all these other elements on, I think it's going to be highly unlikely that we actually see charges coming forward. The medical examiner's ruling of it being a homicide is largely, a check-the-box thing. It's an inflammatory term, but it's one of the 4 or 5 options that the medical examiner really has when determining how someone died.
So this may not be necessarily a prelude to a prosecution.
Right. That's not binding on any court to deem it a homicide connected to these events.
And a prosecutor doesn't necessarily have to bring a case. They can say, we don't have anything here.
Right. They can look at it and say, maybe this wouldn't be successful and it's not worth pursuing.
And I think they have to look at it any time that there is a homicide decision. They look at it. But it goes above and beyond the typical hurdles that the government has. This is an extremely difficult case.
And uncharted territory almost, for sure. Kirsten Wilson, Misty Marris, thanks for joining us both, ladies. We'll see where this goes, and obviously our thoughts remain with the Brady family, who made such an impact over the past 3 decades. Arthel, back to you.